Now, to no one's surprise following Dialga, we have Palkia. The Master of Space has been a fan favorite since it debuted as the mascot of Pokemon Pearl, and it was everywhere in 4th Gen. It played a pivotal role in the game's climax as well as Pokemon Platinum. It was on the art of Pokemon Battle Revolution, and it had a role as a boss in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon 2, though sadly wasn't primal like its counterpart Dialga. It also appeared in a few Pokemon movies, of course, usually with the other dragons. Anyways, today we'll examine if Palkia ripped through the competitive Pokemon continuum like it did space and dimensions, and thus we ask, how good was Palkia actually? And in this video we'll be going over these competitive formats. The first thing that stands out about Palkia are its astounding offensive capabilities, starting with its stats, then moving on to its stabs, Water and Dragon together, which are only resisted by Empoleon and Shedinja, the former not being used in Ubers, and the latter being niche, as well as destroyed by Fire Blast. Palkia could even use the Lustrous Orb to boost its stabs further, and of course its water moves were also further boosted by the ever-present Kyogre's Rain. And speaking of Ogre, the second thing that stands out about Palkia is its quadruple water resistance. This gives it the distinction of being one of the few Pokemon able to withstand 2 fully powered rain-boosted water spouts from Choice Specs Kyogre. This was an important role to have on a team, and Palkia often found itself on the 6th slot of teams in order to cover the hole, especially as it made for a fine revenge killer with the Choice Scarf set, which mowed through offense and didn't mind either of Ubers' 2 main weathers, as it could switch from Hydro Pump and Thunder to Fire Blast depending on which weather was up. The Scarf set wasn't much of a wall breaker though, and it was a wall breaker that Palkia truly got to show its strength. It generally used a set of Spatial Rend, Hydro Pump, Fire Blast, and Thunder to rip through the opposition's defenses. When unencumbered by the restrictions of a choice item, almost nothing was safe regardless of weather, the 2 exceptions being Lugia in the sun and Blissey. The former was not only weather reliant and Stealth Rock weak, but also overall passive enough to be abused by Palkia's teammates. And for the latter, Palkia also had a solid base 120 attack stat and could switch Hydro Pump for Aqua Tail. With boosts from Rain and Lustrous Orb, even Blissey got absolutely slammed. One thing that set Palkia apart from other wall breakers and Ubers was its rather unique 100 base speed. This allowed it to slice through other offense as well. Ubers is known for its crowded base 90 tier with Groudon, Kyogre, Dialga, and Giratina Origin all hanging out there, and one of Rayquaza's distinct advantages is that it gets the jump on them with its base 95. Palkia beats the 90s in addition to Ray. His, in conjunction with its Kyogre stopping abilities, meant it could shred through defensive teams while maintaining effectiveness against offense, which was a rare quality. This great offense matchup extended to potential difficulties revenge killing it. It was a dragon type not weak to ice, which was notable against Mewtwo and Scarf Kyogre, and if Palkia chose to run the Haban Berry, it would cover its only weakness, allowing it to take various dragon attacks like Dragon Pulses from the Laddies, Outrageous from Garchomp, Draco Meteors from Dialga and Giratina Origin, and of course Spatial Rends from opposing Palkia. Palkia of course had other sets, like Choice Specs, as the sheer strength was simply stunning, with Rain Hydro Pump 2-hit KOing Blissey, and it also made an excellent Trick Room alongside Dialga, but it was mostly known for either using Scarf Speed to hold its team together or ditching it for freedom on its 4 attacks to rip the other team apart. Countering Kyogre's offense with vicious offense of its own was Palkia's trademark, and it did incredibly well in Gen 4 Ubers. Then in VGC 2010, one could bring up to 4 restricted Pokemon on a team, with 2 brought to battle, and Palkia was often one of them. Palkia had a fantastic set of attributes. It destroyed Kyogre, it packed Trick Room, it wasn't weak to ice just like Dialga, and could run fire moves for Abomasnow. And unlike Dialga, it wasn't weak to Earthquake and close combat. It only had one weakness in Dragon, which it could and often did patch with Haban Berry, and with its great bulk, it was quite tough to immediately bring down. From what little documentation of Gen 4 VGC exists, Palkia was quite popular, appearing in a lot of notable matches throughout the season. And of course at Worlds, it was used 3 times in the top 8, including Ryan Chambers, who reached 8th, Alan Chambers, who reached 7th, and Yasuki Tochigi, who took the runner-up spot. So as you can see, Palkia was a great Pokemon in the metagame, and as such saw usage on the biggest stage. The introduction of Generation 5 saw quite a change in surroundings, most notably Arceus forms and Ferrothorn, among quite a few others. What didn't change was Palkia. Its Scarf and Wallbreaker sets returned, functioning the same way they did in the generation prior on both Sun and Rain teams. However, this time around, Palkia's Wallbreaker set rose to greater prominence within the metagame, to the extent that a common complaint was that it was uncounterable for the otherwise strong defensive teams that made up most of the meta. Eviolite Chansey was bulky enough to withstand even Aqua Tails boosted by the Lustrous Orb and Rain, but Chansey just got completely destroyed by the ever-present Ferrothorn, meaning it wasn't that common, nor was it too threatening on the few occasions it did show up. Of course, Palkia still tore offense apart with new base 90 victims in Reshiram and Zekrom, but it specialized in absolutely slaughtering defensive cores, rain or shine. Arceus forms were fine against other Pokemon's Draco Meteors, but they did not enjoy Hydro Pump in the rain. And Arceus Grass in the sun got blowtorched by Fire Blast. Not to mention that even in rain, Arceus Grass wouldn't appreciate Thunder Paralysis for later in the game and was forced to recover if hazards were up, allowing one of Palkia's teammates to switch in for free. Black and White 2 brought some interesting changes. Genesect became the most common Scarfer, which Scarf Palkia enjoyed as it got the jump on it. Wallbreaker Palkia became even better against offense with the addition of the base 95 speed Kyurem White, who contributed to the rise of Arceus Steel and especially defensive Kyogre, two Pokemon utterly shredded by Palk. It tore defense up harder than ever by using Dragon Tail, and in conjunction with hazard support, it easily weakened Arceus forms to the point of not being able to switch in, allowing Palkia to claim a kill before potentially repeating the process again. This also harassed Chansey even more, as well as Lugia and Ho-Oh in the sun. Arceus couldn't set up Calm Minds in front of it either. Palkia even sometimes used Sleep Talk to really dominate offense, taking away one of their best weapons in Darkrai Dark Void. Palkia ended the generation by almost never running Scarf anymore. It was simply too threatening to offense and stall alike when unrestricted by choice. Any top Gen 5 Uber player knows that it is probably the most dangerous Pokemon in the entire tier, and that's considering all 17 Arceus forms. Now on to Gen 6. The introduction of fairies was a huge blow to Palkia, as they stopped its dragon onslaught and threatened it hard in return. Also, rain was no longer permanent, so it couldn't threaten them with vicious Hydro Pumps. However, the Soul Dew Laddie twins weren't released, and Specs Kyogre was dominating the tier, so Palkia still saw quite a lot of use, adopting a specially defensive set that could also handle Yveltal and Mega Mewtwo Y quite well. It ran Toxic to punish defensive Defog Arceus, and Thunder Wave to ensure that Xerneas couldn't use it as setup fodder, while generally being difficult to KO. Palkia had an important place in the metagame. But then Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire came around, and the power creep got worse. Groudon was now a Kyogre counter, the Soul Dew Laddie twins were released, and they could deal with Primal Groudon as well as Primal Kyogre while not being affected by Klefki's spikes. Suddenly, Palkia had major competition in its Kyogre countering niche, and the competition was better in that role while also giving Palkia a hard time. In response to Primal Groudon, Primal Kyogre even started using physical sets with Earthquake off its new base 150 attack, something Palkia absolutely could not handle more than once. On top of that, Mega Salamence raised the general speed and power level even higher, and Palkia struggled to keep up with teams full of threats it couldn't handle, like Xerneas, Megamence, Primal Groudon, the Laddie twins, and many more. Sadly, Palkia was no longer fast, strong, or bulky enough to have a real niche, and it faded from meaningful use in the metagame. In VGC 2016, the year of the unrestricted Pokemon, Palkia was unfortunately not that good. While it did handle Primal Kyogre decently, it got utterly dumpstered by Xerneas, Primal Groudon smacked it and blocked its Hydro Pumps with Desolate Land, and Mega Rayquaza bowled over it, as did other fast, strong, unrestricted Pokemon like Mega Salamence and Mega Gengar. It was immensely difficult to justify a slot for Palkia, especially given how unbelievably strong and effective its restricted competition was. It saw a few spots of usage, but only a few. These trainers who so bravely used Palkia in 2016, and I apologize if I butcher any of your names, were Vishal, who reached 4th at the Singapore Regionals, William Basilino, who reached 6th at the Preganziol Regionals, Ivan Yepes, who reached 7th at the Columbia Regionals, Z Zhang, who reached 6th at the Taiwan Regionals, and SB, who reached 27th at the South Korean Nationals. This lack of usage reflected Palkia's lack of viability in the metagame, and it's just weird how so many powerful Pokemon with high base stat totals can be borderline unusable sometimes, but that's just the game we play. Now on to Gen 7, Palkia received some hype at the start of Generation 7 since it had the move Heal Block, which when powered up by Psychium Z would not only prevent the opponent from healing, but also double Palkia's special attack. This seemed like a superb stall breaking tactic, but it failed to make much of an impact on the metagame as a whole. It didn't have much of a defensive niche outside of countering Kyogre, which was done better by other Pokemon, and its ability to wall break wasn't anything special. Then in Ultra Sun and Moon, Necrozma Duskmane became a big part of the metagame, and Palkia Palkia's steel resistance began to pay dividends, as it was one of the few Pokemon that could absorb Sun-Steel Strike and break through it, as well as not being stopped by Celesteela. And this basically meant that it finally had something else to do besides check Primal Kyogre. And with these free turns, it could potentially blow some notable holes in the opponent's team because it wasn't that easy to wall. It became quite the stall breaker when that style of play rose in popularity. With Stealth Rock up, Lugia's multi-scale wouldn't be active, and Lugia would struggle to switch in, while Palkia would absolutely destroy Blissey with a Life Orb Focus Punch. Also, being weak to Xerneas wasn't as big a deal anymore, with Primal Groudon and Duskmane reliably anchoring Palkia's team. Plus, Xerneas didn't want to switch into a Life Orb Hydro Pump, and a Primal Groudon looking to soak one up would be crushed by Spatial Rend. Palkia was more relegated to wall breaking duty, though it could no longer mow through offense like nobody's business anymore, with fiends like Marshadow and Naganado running around. As such, it wasn't as dominant against much of the metagame as one would prefer from a consistent Pokemon, and thus it was a niche pick. However, it did once again have a niche, and was used by several strong trainers who made use of its underrated, unique set of talents to get an edge over their opponents. Tapu's making the metagame even more fairy-focused meant Palkia was even worse than before. Tapu Bulu and Tapu Fini completely walled both its stabs, as they all hit Palkia incredibly hard, and Tapu Fini even weakened the power of Palkia's Spatial Rend with Misty Terrain. Also, Xerneas still existed, and Palkia had a ton of competition as a restricted Pokemon. It usually didn't offer enough to a team to justify it. On the bright side though, Palkia utterly crushed the incredibly common Incineroar, and Palkia's powerful fire moves roasted the multitude of grass types in the tier, which allowed it to fire off powerful Hydro Pumps, sometimes boosted by rain. With a Life Orb attached, it hit a lot of the metagame incredibly hard. However, this bright side was quite dim when compared to its seemingly endless downsides. Fairies were just too strong, and as a result, its only notable usage in the Sun series was Luis Galeana's second place at the Merida, Mexico Regionals. Well done to Luis for making Palkia work, but it still wasn't as good as the other Pokemon. But then in the Moon series, it got the opportunity to upgrade Hydro Pump into Hydro Vortex with Waterium Z, which allowed it to legitimately threaten Xerneas, which was utterly huge. KOing some Groudon even in the Sun was nothing to sneeze at either. However, its other issues remained, and they were still plentiful. But in the Moon series, we found a lot more information on it in general, so we can surmise that it at least got better from the Sun series. But as a result of its issues, it was only used twice, to reach 5th by Binji Wang at Brampton, Canada Regionals, and Gabriel Cedeno to reach 3rd at the Ciudad Panama Regionals. Again, well done to them, but Palkia was still kinda bad, and its lack of usage proved it. Then in the Ultra series, what little semblance of a niche Palkia had completely disappeared from the metagame. Primal Groudon was overwhelming, both itself and its inability to more easily support Xerneas, who was now more dangerous than ever. Ultra Necrozma utterly decimated it, and Palkia had to compete with both Primal Kyogre and Mega Rayquaza for the water and dragon spots on the teams. Both Pokemon, as well as Mega Salamence as another dragon, were far better than Palkia overall, and Primal Kyogre paired well with Mega Rayquaza, so the water and dragon slot was both covered. So much like the previous years, again it was hard to justify a restricted slot for Palkia, and as a result we did not find any notable usage in the Ultra series yet. And that's it. So how good was Palkia actually? Well, in its first 2 generations, it was lauded as both a counter to King Kyogre and as a fierce offensive weapon that utterly dismantled stall while using its unusually high speed by Uber standards to run over offense. The arrival of fairies in the subsequent generation was a huge blow, as was the vicious power creep and the loss of the permanent weather it abused so well. As a result, its viability plunged, though it did see a slight resurgence in the latter half of Generation 7. VGC told a similar story, though it redeemed itself less in Sun and Moon than it did in singles. Overall, Palkia was an amazing example of how fairies and power creep changed the game, going from utterly dominant to having its viability slashed quite quickly. However, for the trainer with their wits about them, Palkia's got the tools to make anyone regret sleeping on it. Thanks for watching, everyone, and as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content. And for the comments, I want to know, what do you think about competitive Palkia? How would you make it better? Are you as surprised as I am that it's not as viable as Dialga overall? Because I sure was. Whatever it is, let me know in the comments. And thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of the videos, and thank you to everyone else watching as well. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.